They are elegant marvels of human engineering, gossamer towers of steel and wire. Cranes will obediently haul load after load, making the tough jobs look easy. At the heart of almost every construction site on the planet is a crane. The slender cables of these magnificent machines appear to move objects effortlessly. But for help with the really big jobs, man has invented massive gargantuan cranes. These are the spectacular cranes few people ever get to see close up. When used correctly, they are tame behemoths. But when used incorrectly, these beasts can cause chaos and destruction, leaving only a twisted wreck where a crane once stood. They soar into the air, uplifting the spirits. Looming high in the sky, they are amazing lifting devices known as giant cranes. Every day, hundreds of thousands of cranes are at work around the globe. Giant tower cranes like these are especially useful in cramped urban areas like this because of the small amount of space needed on the ground for its base. Like ships in the sky, the different parts of a crane borrow heavily from nautical terminology. The slender column that supports the crane is called a mast. The forward arm is called a jib. Behind it is the counter jib, which supports the motors and the counterweights. And the device that moves the hook along rails on the jib is called a trolley. Finn Heidenreich-Ries has one of the most unique jobs in the world. But like many people, he must first take an elevator to get to his work. He arrives at an office that can withstand wind speeds of up to 175 miles per hour. Then enters a glass room with a 180-degree view, takes a seat in a chair that rises 28 stories in the air, and enjoys one of the most spectacular views in Norway. Finn Heidenreich-Ries is the operator of the K-10,000, the largest and most powerful tower crane in the world. The dimensions of this slender giant are remarkable. It soars over 35 stories into the sky. Its height is the equivalent of 2 Statue of Liberties, stacked one on top of the other. Its counter jib is the length of a 747 jumbo jet. This gigantic machine is so big that it actually includes a smaller second crane at the top to service the main crane. This $9 million super crane can lift and swing a weight equivalent to 100 cars.
In spite of the size of the crane, it's still just an ordinary tower crane. It's just bigger than any other tower crane.
There are only a few unique individuals qualified to sit at the controls of this 1,000-ton giant.
Well, the first time I ever drove it, the tickling in my tummy was terrible for the first week. Because you're sitting up about 100 meters and looking down at everybody, everything gets so small. It took about a week to overcome the so-called fear for heights. My wife says that I'm a bit nuts.
This giant crane's home alongside a deep water fjord in Norway, makes it ideally suited for loading and unloading the large ocean-going vessels which serve as oil rigs in the North Sea. Paris, France. First founded as a fishing village by the Romans in 52 BC, the City of Light has grown and evolved considerably in the past 2,000 years. Today, in this Parisian suburb, 5 giant tower cranes are being used at one construction site the size of only a city block. With this many cranes on top of each other, a collision would seem inevitable. But a sophisticated computer helps keep track of their positions, making collisions virtually impossible.
Each crane must have a computer and a display on it. These systems prevent cranes from touching each other.
With this complex tracking device, the crane operator knows at all times the position of the other cranes, while he maneuvers his own jib. The computer keeps track of the movements of the trolley along the jib and allows the crane operator to move the load safely from one side of the site to another. Tower cranes are easily the most important piece of heavy machinery on the site. Without their lifting abilities, work would slow to a crawl.
La grue à tour sur un chantier, c'est
The crane operator is like the conductor of an orchestra.
du chantier.
All of the work follows the rhythm of the crane. If the crane fails or breaks down, the entire construction site is paralyzed.
The skill and importance of a tower crane operator is so much in demand that they may be one of the highest paid workers at the site. To learn how to operate a tower crane, many trainees attend an intensive 3-week study course given year-round at the Potain training facility in La Clayette, France.
Encore un petit peu. Voilà. Stop. Rattrapez un petit peu le ballon. Un petit peu de chariot avant, là.
It's Hafidi Abbas's 3rd week at the school, and he's been put behind the controls of one of the smaller tower cranes at the training facility.
Maintenant, le chariot. Chariot arrière.
It takes a steady hand and a keen eye to land even this small weight on the target.
The first time I saw a tower crane, I wanted to be up on top, to feel what it was like to be up so high. I wanted to play with the levers, move objects hanging from a cable.
It's Abbas's dream to eventually operate the biggest and the tallest tower crane in the world. To meet changing environmental standards, some of the world's biggest power plants need to be updated and modified. The General James M. Gavin plant on the Ohio River is one of the largest coal-fired power plants in the world. Generating 2.6 million kilowatts of power, the plant supplies electricity to over 1 million people. But a new selective catalytic reduction system needs to be installed to reduce dangerous nitrous oxide emissions exiting the plant. It's a big job that requires a giant crane, and the Manitowoc 21000 was chosen for the job. It's part of the next generation of heavy lifting equipment. The 21000 is one of the largest crawler cranes the world has ever seen. With its 8 immense crawlers and giant wheeled counterweight, it also looks unlike any other crane. Mobile and crawler cranes became popular at the start of the 20th century. The base of these cranes are mounted on wheels or crawler tracks, allowing the crane to move. The boom, or jib, extends from the base. The maximum load a crawler crane can handle depends on how far the boom is extended. In the upright position, the 21,000 can lift a load weighing an amazing 178,000 pounds. That's the equivalent of about 45 cars. But as the arm extends further out, the strength of the boom diminishes considerably, until, in its fully extended position, the boom of the 21,000 can only lift about 69,000 pounds, or just 18 cars.
The capacity decreases as the radius gets greater. People have exactly the same problem. Most anybody can carry a 40-pound suitcase. It gets a good deal harder to carry the 40-pound suitcase on a stretched-out arm. It's the same thing with a crane.
When it's fully rigged, the boom of the giant 21,000 reaches the awesome height of a 60-story building. Crane operation historically has been a field dominated by men, but some women are breaking with tradition. Lisa Schoolcraft, who has been assigned to the 21,000, is in a 4-year apprenticeship program at her local union. She hopes one day soon to become a crane operator.
You have a lot of responsibilities operating a crane. You have people's lives you got to think about and how you're going to pick your load and keep the crane on the ground. To know that you have got complete control of something that is so humongous, so big, that would be the biggest rush to me.
A complex onboard computer and twin joysticks allow the entire crane to be operated by just one person. And as for creature comforts, there's even a reclining cab. It's a far cry from the early steam-powered cranes.
As far as operating older and newer cranes, you're talking now with the way it's gotten so advanced technology-wise. It goes back to, it's kind of cliche, but it's Flintstones and Jetsons, you know? If you have to sit in them all day, believe me, it's a whole lot better to be in one of these. It keeps you in a good, comfortable state of mind. Because if one mistake up there, that's the biggest worry anybody has. Worst case scenario is you're gonna have a fatality.
For operators like Mark Morris, there is nothing more important than the safe operation of their cranes. But unfortunately, crane accidents do happen, and the repercussions can be devastating. A 50-ton crane that had been extended too far for the load of steel it was carrying collapsed on a busy New York City sidewalk, crushing a woman's legs, pinning her to the edge of a foundation pit. Rescuers worked for almost 6 hours and used a larger crane to lift the fallen machine off the pinned woman. Remarkably, she survived the ordeal and surgeons were able to save her legs. According to one study done by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, crane mishaps claim the lives of over 50 people per year. A construction worker at the time, Doyle Peaks survived his harrowing ordeal.
I had an accident in 1986. I jumped on a piece of equipment and started down an incline too fast, and the next thing I knew, I was laying under the machine. And I grabbed everything I could on there and couldn't hold myself on there, and I almost lost my life because of it. And it put me in a position to do lots of praying that day and some serious thinking.
Doyle Peaks operates a website which is dedicated to preventing future accidents and casualties. Peaks's website was one of the first to report the destruction of one of the biggest crawler cranes in the world, Big Blue, when it collapsed on top of a baseball stadium it was helping to build in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
What the hell is it? What's going on?
down here. Okay, watch it, watch it!
Three people died, and 5 others were injured in the collapse.
I'm really concerned about all of the crane accidents that we're having, what's causing these crane accidents. Most of them are strictly caused by human error. People that's out there in the field, not just the operator, but supervision, management, take an attitude that it's not all that dangerous, but it is dangerous. People getting injured and killed, we see all the time.
In New Providence, Iowa, a giant tower crane was in the final stages of placing a 50,000-gallon tank atop a platform. Within seconds, the tank began to sway, and the tower crane came crashing down. Tragically, 1 worker was killed, and 2 others were injured.
It's a scary video. It should wake a lot of people up and make them realize that we need to put more forethought into some of these lifts before we start making them.
Even the best engineered giant crane can sometimes find itself in harm's way. When an old cotton mill that was being converted to loft apartments caught fire in Atlanta, the operator of a giant tower crane found himself trapped. Because of the dry, windy conditions, the fire quickly spread. Wooden beams inside the building, which had been treated with oil, fed the flames. Before long, firefighters were faced with a raging inferno that was out of control. An old brick wall adjacent to the base of the crane was in imminent danger of collapsing. If the wall were to tumble, it would take the tower crane with it. To make matters worse, the operator was forced to the rear of the crane when his control cabin began to catch on fire. As the flames and the intense heat spread all around him, he waited anxiously to be rescued. A firefighter was flown in. Dangling from a single cable, the firefighter attempted to land on the crane. Finally, the rescue was made. The longest day of this tower crane operator's career had finally come to a close. Giant tower cranes became widely accepted in Europe after World War II. Rebuilding cities that lay in ruin became the primary mission of the Allies, and tower cranes became their chief weapon. One of the most devastated cities in Germany was Cologne. Continual air raids between 1942 and 1945 destroyed 90% of the city. Today, Cologne is one of the most modern cities in Germany and boasts of not only having one of the oldest cathedrals in Europe, but also one of the tallest tower cranes in the world. A new office building is being built here that will be 45 stories high. In this part of Germany, only the cathedral will be higher, and by barely 20 feet. This remarkable giant tower crane soars 561 feet in the air. And it takes the crane operator 1 hour each day to climb to his job. Huge obstacles needed to be overcome in order to construct a large building on such a small site.
It's a very narrow place where we have to erect the building. So it means it's just the building. We have no storage place. We could only erect one crane, one Liebherr crane.
All the heavy lifting at the site is dependent upon this one crane, so it needs to be very stable. Remarkably, the crane is attached to the building at only 2 points, yet it can still lift a load weighing as much as 12 tons. A giant crane this height needs to be incredibly strong and has been engineered to withstand hurricane-force wind speeds of 90 miles per hour. But for safety reasons, the crane must be shut down if the winds reach 20 miles per hour.
The crane driver is the only person in the city who could quit his work for one day because of the wind situation.
But how do tower cranes reach such great heights? The answer lies in a tower crane's extraordinary self-climbing mechanism. Hydraulic jacks raise a part of the crane up. An 8-foot section of the mast is inserted and bolted to the tower. And the process is repeated until the crane is at the desired height. In this process, the crane actually helps build itself. At 11,398 feet, this is Europe's highest railroad, and it's one of the only ways for crews and equipment to get to one of the most difficult construction sites in the world. A giant tower crane is being brought to the mountain resort of Jungfraujoch, where one of Europe's most challenging projects is about to begin. Here, a new 5-story mountain resort is being built. Because space is so scarce at this high elevation, storing the crane sections was out of the question. A special helicopter will have to pick up the parts of the tower crane and, one by one, bring them up to the site. At this location, the old rules don't apply. Airlifting the segments of the mast takes precision and nerves of steel. Assembling the tower was a race against time. When blessed with good weather, workers move quickly to put the tower together. And before long, it reaches the desired height of almost 20 stories. A sudden deterioration in the weather can strike at any time. Temperatures can drop to minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind can quickly reach a hurricane force of 160 miles per hour, and a sudden snowstorm could bring with it total whiteout conditions. Workers bravely meet the challenges of this dangerous assignment. Like circus performers on a high wire, they fearlessly attach the final length of jib. Finally, the hard work pays off, and this amazing giant tower crane is fully assembled. At last, work can begin at Europe's highest construction site. The crane was so efficient that the 3-year construction schedule took only 16 months to complete. Some of the lifts giant cranes perform are nothing short of remarkable. They can easily lift rail cars, boats, even airplanes. And over the years, they have been designed in many shapes and sizes. A completely new generation of high-tech tower cranes has just been built that has the ability to assemble itself and be driven on the freeway like a car at speeds of over 50 miles per hour. One of the most unusual tower cranes in the world is the mobile crane MK80.
This crane is like my baby, but it is too heavy to take it in your arms because the complete weight is 48 tons. It is a really heavy baby.
Looking like a giant toy, the MK80 needs only one person pressing a few buttons to be fully assembled in 12 minutes. And it can reach a height of almost 15 stories. With a price tag of $500,000, you're not likely to see this in many toy stores just yet. This crane is an engineering marvel, combining elements of a mobile crane and a tower crane. This wonder crane was developed to rapidly bring the power and dexterity of a tower crane to almost any construction site in the world.
If you need, for example, to erect a chimney on a construction site, one of these cranes will arrive and they will do the job for you. Within 3 weeks, one of these crane types from the MK80 had more than 70 erections at different job sites.
Every day, hundreds of trucks and rail cars with cargo destined for the far reaches of the globe enter Virginia's Norfolk International Terminal. What makes this facility special is that it's home to 3 of the largest container cranes in the world. Taller than the Statue of Liberty, each of the giant cranes weighs more than 1,200 tons. Used to load and unload container ships that can carry as many as 4,500 containers, these monster cranes were custom built in Shanghai, China. A specially rigged cargo ship carried the cranes fully assembled for 3 months, making for a strange and impressive sight. They left Shanghai, China, crossed the Pacific, then went around South America's treacherous southern tip, finally ending up off the coast of Virginia. The spectacular 200-foot reach of these giant cranes is unique in the world and will be able to service the next generation of container ships.
The only thing you can say is, wow. When you're looking down from that height with that massive a structure under you and you've got the kind of fingertip control that these cranes have, you're just left with a feeling that this is going to be something that I was very proud of being a part of.
Each crane, on average, can swiftly process 30 containers an hour, or roughly 1 every 2 minutes, making these the race cars of the crane world. Container crane operators work skillfully and quickly, landing a spreader precisely on top of the container. Special lifting pins are inserted into the 4 corners of the container and are twist-locked into place. The red light indicates that the twist locks are unlocked. The white light means the spreader has landed correctly. The green lights means the spreader is locked and the container is ready to go. like mechanical creatures from a science fiction movie, specialized high-speed mobile cranes called straddle carriers service the main crane by rapidly moving containers to and from the dock. Big, specialized giant container cranes like these are a relatively new invention.
Most cargo that flows in and out of the world's port flows in containers now. It used to be, you'd see the old movies, you know, on the waterfront, you'd see cargo on pallets or in these big cargo nets. That wasn't very efficient.
Cargo was often damaged, and the cost of loading and unloading was very high.
About 30 years ago, a fellow named Malcolm McLean here in the United States came up with the idea of putting cargo in these containers. That has sped up the process of loading and unloading cargo tremendously. It used to be that in the old days a freighter would come into a port and it might be there for a week or 10 days. Now a container ship comes into a port and it's loaded and unloaded in the space of 7 or 8 hours.
It costs about $70,000 a day to operate a container ship, so ship owners want to get in and out of a port as quickly as possible. It's not unusual to see a container crane facility working throughout the night. Hundreds of high wattage lights on the cranes themselves help turn darkness into daylight. Like a well-timed ballet of man and machine, these cranes can efficiently lift several thousand tons of material in an 8-hour shift. Another 12 of these extraordinary super cranes have been ordered and will be delivered here in the next few years, making the Port of Virginia one of the world's leading shipping terminals. Giant cranes like the ones at the Port of Virginia are magnificent machines that can operate in almost any condition. But cranes are also machines that can take us to new worlds. Deep in the Cascade Range of the Pacific Northwest lies an ancient forest. Douglas firs, western hemlocks, and red cedars grow undisturbed and untouched by man. It is from here that scientists are discovering a world few have seen. Up in the sky, a little bit higher than the neighboring trees, is one of the most unusual cranes in the world. The giant Wind River Canopy Crane facility allows scientists to conduct experiments in the canopies of trees that are as tall as 20-story buildings.
The reason it's important to study the tops of trees is because this is where all the action is. This is where the sun's energy is being captured, converted into organic products. It's a basis for life in the whole ecosystem. This is where all the gas exchange is occurring, where the CO2 is being taken up, the oxygen is being released.
The Wind River Canopy Crane covers an area of 5.6 acres. Within that area are about 1,000 trees, which are readily accessible from the crane. The Wind River Canopy Crane has the distinction of being one of the only camouflaged cranes in the world. It has been painted the same shade of green as the nearby trees. allowing the giant crane to naturally blend in with its surroundings. Its jib is one of the longest in North America, extending out 279 feet into the sky. Mark Crichton has been the primary research tower crane operator here at the Wind River Canopy Crane for 5 years. From his control cabin, which is about 250 feet in the air, he can deliver scientists with pinpoint accuracy to almost any tree within the giant crane's radius.
My main job is to pick up personnel and move them throughout the canopy of the forest as opposed to moving materials on a construction site. You can't horse the load around like you would on a construction site. You can't be quite as rough. You have to be pretty much have a lot of finesse and make sure everything is smooth. I can stand out here in the morning and listen to, a serenade of birds as opposed to jackhammers and diesel motors. I can stand up on the counter jib and hear elk bugle a lot of times. It's just really a pristine place to work.
Jerry Franklin is an arbonaut, or a tree canopy scientist. He is one of the world's most knowledgeable and respected forest ecologists, and was instrumental in getting the tower crane built at this site.
Before we had a tower crane, we were pretty much confined to having to climb trees, which of course is somewhat challenging physically, but also very limiting. It's really empowered us to go places in the canopy to make observations that we've never done before.
New perspectives are exactly what arbonauts around the world are seeking, and giant canopy cranes are becoming indispensable tools in their quest for discovery. Deep in the Amazon rainforest of southern Venezuela, scientists have undertaken yet another difficult canopy crane challenge. After flying the sections of a giant tower crane from Germany to Caracas, the team of scientists and engineers had to continue by boat, as there is no road that takes us to this amazing site deep in the forest.
Wir sind hier am Boden des Regenwalds eigentlich am falschen Platz.
On the ground of the jungle, we are at the wrong location. If you want to observe the rainforest, you have to get to the treetops, where 90 to 95% of all the organisms live. On the ground, we can only make a few meager observations.
First, 400 feet of track for the crane were assembled in the middle of the jungle, a day's journey from the nearest village. A helicopter on loan from the Venezuelan army was used to fly in the different pieces of the giant tower crane. Despite repeated attempts, the team didn't succeed with the assembly of the second tower piece. Logistical and communication problems were overwhelming. It was now time to regroup and come up with new solutions. A few months later, although the rainy season is not quite over, another attempt is made. The helicopter was modified. A special transparent viewing bubble is installed so that the pilot can see what is happening on the ground. Despite the modification, the helicopter is forced to make some dangerous maneuvers, leading to some close calls. But soon, the effort pays off, and the mast section is installed. Next, the revolving platform is assembled. With a tolerance of only ½ inch, assembly of the jib section requires absolute precision. A mistake now would mangle the giant crane and doom the project. Finally, the crane is fully assembled. More than 2 acres of tree canopy area can be researched from the gondola. At least 700 different species of trees and several thousand plant and insect species are awaiting curious scientists.
Nicht zu fassen. Das ist eine eigene kleine Welt für sich.
I can't believe it. This is a new world of its own right. It is a cosmos within a cosmos. This is exactly what we need. This is so beautiful.
Around the world, giant canopy cranes have helped reveal a unique new universe to scientists.
When I bring people up here at the end of one of our canopy tours, I like to just stop and hang out quietly for a moment above this old-growth canopy. And I suggest, they just look around them, absorb the bigger picture, and try and remember the richness, the complexity, the beauty, the diversity of an old-growth forest canopy.
The technology behind modern cranes can actually be traced back to the time of the ancient Egyptians. A single pyramid contains 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing 5,000 pounds. It is thought that primitive cranes were absolutely necessary in the construction of these ancient skyscrapers. The Greeks wrote extensively about the mechanics of cranes. In fact, the Greek scholar of classical mechanics, Archimedes, was so sure he had perfected the operation of lifting devices that he offered to move the earth itself if he were only given a fixed place to stand. One of the biggest developments in giant cranes came with the invention of primitive engines powered by men inside tread wheels. They raised and lowered ropes by shifting their weight. Some workers, unfortunately, found themselves in a sudden and unstoppable counter-rotation of the tread wheel. Almost always proved to be a fatal situation. By the Middle Ages, cranes were becoming essential in the construction of Europe's grand cathedrals. And great Renaissance thinkers like Leonardo da Vinci were hard at work designing primitive tower cranes that could swivel and move on rails. But the real revolution in cranes came with the introduction of steam-powered engines in the 19th century. The true power of cranes could be unleashed to aid in the construction of massive projects. Early skyscrapers like the Empire State Building could only have been conceived and built thanks to the brute strength of giant cranes that could readily lift massive steel beams hundreds of feet in the air. It can be said that cranes are responsible for the shape of our modern skylines. Modern tower cranes are astonishingly flexible tools. They can be configured in almost any shape and size. Some allow 2 cranes to work literally on top of each other. Some have the ability to gooseneck over a tower, and others have telescoping jibs that allow them to work within a dome structure. Giant tower cranes all have one thing in common. From a distance, they appear stiff and rigid, but a careful examination reveals something extraordinary. They actually sway back and forth. This mild movement is not unlike that of a sailor on a gentle ocean.
The first time when I climbed up to the top of a crane, I guess my first surprise was to discover the flexibility of the machine and to see that each time we had to make one movement, all the crane was reacting backwards, forwards, and so on. So I think that everybody who gets the first time in a crane will be impressed by this.
By speeding up the picture of a crane operating, we can begin to see how much the mast is actually moving. These enormous stresses and pressures are constant during the life of this crane, which might be as long as 20 years. Manufacturing a strong yet flexible tower crane requires quality workmanship at every step of the process. It must be built with the absolute precision of a clock and the strength of a tank. Thousands of joints must be flawlessly welded. The crane is then painted with anti-corrosion material before being painted twice more. And when the crane is finished, it still has to be checked and rechecked for even the most minute imperfections. It must be solid and strong for the years of work that lie ahead.
Each time we rotate the crane, there is a torsion effect in every element of the mast. So we need to make sure that after 7, 10, 15 years of life, after thousands of rotation movements, the mast elements are able to support so many torsion cycles.
At the Potane testing facility, every component of a new prototype crane is carefully tested. This machine reproduces all the loads and efforts on the mast section which a giant crane might commonly encounter during its normal lifespan. This machine applies 63,000 cycles to the steel structure. It conducts the same test in rain or sunshine, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. When the 63,000 cycles are completed, then and only then is the prototype tower section approved. Eventually, if all the tests go well, this new tower design will be incorporated into the next generation of giant cranes and will hopefully prevent accidents like this from happening. From the slender beauty of tower cranes, the brute strength of crawler cranes, and the extraordinary speed and accuracy of container cranes, the amazing diversity and importance of cranes, both small and giant, make them one of mankind's most magnificent inventions.